Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Remember to subscribe to the show, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I'm joined by AVFC London Lions member and lifelong Aston Villa fan, Adam Tynan. This is the first episode in a scouting special series. Adam's going to talk us through a few players he'd like Villa to look at in the transfer window. So, Adam, before we get going on your first pick, what have you made of Villa's high-octane transfer dealing so far?
It's been an interesting start, hasn't it, with all the sort of PSR jiggery pokery we seem to be up to. And lovely to be on the right side of that as well, right? Rather than feel the sort of burning injustice of when somebody else seems to bend the rules. It has made it an interesting one to do scouting for, because historically you've got a bit of time to sit back and think about what you need, and it tends to take a few, especially in a tournament year, it takes a few weeks for things to start to get going. But all of a sudden we seem to be 3-4 players in without much thought, and it's hard to know whether those signings are all exactly in a gap that we needed to fill, or whether they are part of a canny deal and nice squad players to have. So do you see Illing Jr. coming in and being a starting option? Is he an option at left wing back? Are we going to go to a 5? Is Berenachea a genuine option to come in and start games at 6 with Kamara out at the start of the season? Really hard to say. Normally you would say there is no way we're signing a player that doesn't fit a system, and you'd read into it. Whereas because of the nature of these transfers, it makes it even harder to work out what the professor's doing next year, whether there might be a change of style. I think one thing we do know about him is he values flexibility, and you would have to say a lot of these players that we're looking at do seem to give us options, which can only be a good thing. The loss of Louise is a hard one to take, but I think along with most Villa fans, as long as there may be an exciting 10/8 in the works, maybe we'd be okay with what we've done transfer business wise in a sort of a necessary evil.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like we're targeting versatility and youth at the moment. It's definitely a change of tack from what we did under that year of Purslow and Gerrard, where we signed a lot of players who are a bit older, big contracts, high salaries, and we're kind of paying the price of that right now, really. But I think with the youth approach, if you think about it, Nedeljkovic, who came in obviously back in January from Red Star, and then you've got Eiling Jr., I think early 20s. Nedeljkovic is a teenager. You've got Berenachea as well, early 20s. I think Ross Barkley, obviously, he's in his 30s, but I think that's a bit of an exception rather than the rule. And just a few other players who've kind of been linked with as well. The lad at Fiorentina, the right back, obviously 19 as well. So all of these sort of links, you can sort of see what Villa are aiming to do. Players that probably aren't a massive risk, in the sense like if they don't work out, you can probably they probably still have a resale value. Whereas if they are a big success, in 3-4 years' time, who knows? Maybe we'll be selling Berenachea to Real Madrid for 80 million quid. It's the sort of approach we're taking. Obviously, Ian Matson as well, very young player, early 20s, and he to me feels a little bit like a player that we've gone up a level in the sort of player we're attracting. That to me feels like somebody who, it's a bit of a statement of intent from Villa that we can get that kind of a player, someone who's just been in the Champions League final, one of the best young left backs in Europe. And also, you mentioned the approach next season. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a bit of an evolution. Matson, he kind of get up and down that wing a bit like Alex Moreno, but he also inverts. Which is not something we've ever really done with fullbacks of Villa, even though a lot of the top teams have been doing that. So again, I wonder if that's something we might see trialed in pre-season. I mean, how do you feel about Matson? Do you know a lot about him at all?
No, excited. I think, like exactly as you said, an absolute upgrade. I think Moreno sort of burst onto the scene, to quote Mika Richards, Aston Villa, as a little bit of unknown to us all, and was fantastic straight off the bat. He never seemed to quite come back from injury with the same, I don't know, explosiveness, dynamism. Luca Digne, obviously quality player who's had an incredible career at top of the game, really, Premier League in France. Both of those players, they're pushing the wrong side of 30 now. And I would say to a certain extent, they do one thing very well, both of them, and therefore have weaknesses on the other side of their game. But what you're saying with Martinez, I think absolutely true. He's very flexible, very technical, capable of out and out left back, getting up and down a little bit. I don't think you're going to see him too much hit the byline in a sort of Moreno-esque way. But yeah, absolutely can hug the touchline, beat a player, cross, but equally very, very comfortable on the ball, playing as a sort of, as you said, is the fashion, a inverted fullback as a sort of midfield option. And we know those triangles are so important to Unai Emery in the slow possession-based build-up that we've become used to over the last year and a half.
Yeah, and it also feels like there's sort of future proofing as well. Like you can kind of imagine Eiling Jr., is he somebody who will be trialed in a variety of positions and then maybe one day could be somebody who steps in if, say, Bailey gets sold one day or Moussa Diaby gets sold one day, comes in as a replacement for that. And then Enzo Barrenechea, maybe Kamara goes in a year or two and Barrenechea steps up. And it feels like all of these things are kind of thought through and there is a bit of a, rather than an instantaneous, I want this now, which I think we saw under Gerrard and Purslow, it feels a little bit more in that 1 year. That's not me just getting at Purslow and people like that, but it does feel like now it's a little bit more like, okay, we're signing this player for a specific reason. We're trying to work within a budget that we've got, and then maybe this player, if it works, could be in a year, 2 years, the main man, and we sell somebody who's at 26, 27, 28, and maybe hitting their peak, and we can get maximum value for them until our revenues catch up with the main Champions League clubs, when maybe then we can change our approach again. But I don't know, it feels a bit like Monchi at Sevilla, is how I put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to see PSR go in the direction of forcing everybody to do that we are encouraged as football clubs to look at emerging talent. We're forced to invest in our academies and our scouting ahead of trying to buy ready-made players on silly money to try and get it done quickly. I think that is the right behaviours to reward. And obviously, PSR is pretty frustrating for a lot of teams at the minute for all sorts of reasons. But I do think with tweaks, with improvements, it's like a sort of slightly wobbly step in the right direction of getting people to build their success through the identification of talent early doors, and rather than what we're used to of trying to go big on big players because you're backed by an oil baron.
And we certainly we could do with some youth in our London Lions football team that we play for on a Sundays. Certainly need some to plan ahead for players who might be replacing us as our bones start to creak.
Yeah, I wake up in cold sweats thinking how many more years am I going to have to run around for? That's the concern. Our scouting policy is exclusively pub based though, and that is costing us. So yeah, I don't know what the alternative is.
I do enjoy that.
We do need it. We need an innovative approach to scouting this summer, don't we?
Yeah, because for those who don't know, we're in a supporters league, so we play teams like Paris Saint-Germain and Inter, and Paris Saint-Germain fully living up to the stereotype of having male models playing for them, genuinely male models, who I don't think their scouting is done in pubs.
I suspect it's done in a lab. They look grown, honestly. They look test tube grown. Some of these guys, they're identikit 6'3" models. I don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah, and they're all very annoyingly good. But so this is the scouting series. So last season we did this, and I looked back at some of the names you mentioned, and you kind of hit it out of the park, really. I think. I think that you should have earned a job out of that. Monchi should be giving you a call, because the names you mentioned were, you mentioned Luis Openda, who went on to Leipzig and had a fantastic season. Hot shot, scored loads of goals. Now in the Belgian international team as well. Iliman Ndiaye, who was at Marseille, and he's moving to, he went from Sheffield United to Marseille, and he's just moving now, it looks like, to Everton for about 18 million. And then, Jeremy Doku, now that looks now as if people would have gone, oh, well, he would have been well known. He really wasn't. Doku was not well known at all the only way I really knew him at the time was because I used to see him do cameos of Belgium at international tournaments, and always thought this guy's really skillful. Why is he not anywhere? And then I don't know where Man City could go and bid 60 million for him. And then also Facundo Medina, a player that I've not kept too many tabs on in the last season, but I believe he's at Lens in France. So yeah, so you kind of hit it out of the park, really. So this time around, you've seen some positions where you think Villa need to strengthen this transfer window. Right centre back, CDM, and a number 10. We're going to start off today on the right centre back. So just talk us through why you've targeted those kind of positions, and in a way how you do your research as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first caveat is, whilst that was, I look pretty smug now on the back of that. There is no footballing expertise that goes into this whatsoever, other than an enjoyment of all of the football statistics available to us now, a little bit of geekishness around getting that into a spreadsheet and tinkering with it and seeing what it comes up with, and a little bit of YouTube and match report type scouting from various places. So it's all desk research. Not an expert. I probably should have retired after the last episode, because I'm only going downhill really with whoever I recommend today. But it's actually sort of, as you were saying, I would say historically it was like a Brentford and Brighton thing to do, sort of moneyball the whole situation. But we're all sort of increasingly doing it, right? And it feels like that's sort of where Villa finds itself a little bit, where we, like you say, we want to be a bit smart about future proofing, rather than, we certainly don't have the cash to go and spend big. With all of the positions I'm going to talk about, I will mention the big names that I think are out of our price bracket, and then the sort of alternatives to them. But I don't think we're quite fishing in those waters at the moment, and very, very few teams are, fewer and fewer teams, to be honest with you. So maybe prices will come down. But right centre back, I think we have pretty much used Diego Carlos and Konsa exclusively there throughout the season. Konsa having to go to right back a reasonable amount. I say having to, sometimes chosen over Matty Cash for, I think, the defensive stability he provides, and probably composure on the ball to a certain extent. But I think a lot of Villa fans will have identified that we were not great defending set pieces, but also crosses, long balls. We lacked a certain physicality and especially aerial ability, I would say, across our back line. That's not just a criticism of Constance and Carlos. Torres, not famous for that. Longley, not famous for that. And either Dino or Moreno, not famous for that either. What you want, and what everybody wants, is a big unit of a centre-back who heads everything, but then is also Beckenbauer on the ball. And they are very, very expensive and very few and far between. I'd probably say if you look statistically, it's no surprise to see Virgil van Dijk comes right to the top of that for somebody who, if you just look at who wins all their headers and who completes all their passes and makes most of them forwards, Van Dijk's your guy. And if you go across Europe, there's a number of names that are sort of emerging, but they are bloody expensive, essentially. So we can look at Diomande at Sporting Lisbon, quoted as being 50, 60 million. Arsenal, Liverpool, United linked. Araujo at Barcelona, potentially available because of their money troubles. Again, United linked. Todibo, who I would have previously said is definitely out of our price bracket, but United have been stifled there so far because of Ineos's ownership of Nice. But latest on that is Ratcliffe's going to take them to court and try to push that deal through. Calafiori, who is Italy's latest long-haired, head-banded, classy centre-back off the ranks.
He was
only heard of him in the last couple of weeks, and he's already going to any big club you can name. And then Jonathan Tah at Leverkusen, who is being heavily, heavily linked with Bayern Munich. There's something interesting in that I think a very, very good centre-back will become available from Bayern Munich. You would think that the options they have in Upamecano, De Ligt, and Kim Min-jae, none of those do badly on the criteria that I'm assessing. So it'd be interesting to see where somebody from that three goes. And to a certain extent, United can't buy all of the centre-backs I've just mentioned. It seems to be them mostly linked. I think they probably want two. But for now, assuming that maybe all of those are a little bit out of our price bracket, I've gone for the level, or maybe even two levels below that, slightly unknown uh, Brighton model of identifying the next guy after those guys.
Hmm.
Um, Probably to start with, before I go on to who my recommendation is, I would have a shout out for Joe Gomez. Not been linked with us recently, but has in the past. I think Gerrard era, we were maybe
Mm,
linked with
that
him.
rings a bell,
But
yeah.
if you're looking for I think it's really touch and go actually as to whether Conser or Joe Gomez is the better player at what they do. But I'd say
Yeah.
they're reasonably similar in their abilities. Joe Gomez is super, super comfortable at right centre back and right back. He is very progressive in what he does, very comfortable because he's played a little bit of DM as well. Very, very comfortable um, passing in triangles, steady in the build up, actually quite threatening with sort of shot creating actions, crosses, and things like that. Much better crosser than, and probably just an all round better attacking threat than Conser.
Mm.
But crucially, he's in the top 1% in top five leagues for aerial wins. He's actually very, very good in the air.
I didn't know that.
You have to take, anytime you take a centre back who also plays a bit at fullback, you have to treat that metric with a pinch of salt because they do some of their aerial wins against wingers rather than Haaland.
Mm.
So they are, you can stat pad a little bit if you are heading long balls against wingers, but massively outperforms Conser on that same metric, who you would argue has the same benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But my out and out recommendation is Feyenoord's Geertruida, who has done the rounds a little bit on the links with various clubs, but not Aston Villa as far as I'm aware. If you weren't aware of him before, he was on the wrong end of the 3-2 loss for the Netherlands in the Euros the other day. He played the full 90 minutes at right back.
Right.
Very difficult to get into with Frimpong available at the minute. But good enough to be in the mix in what is a pretty talented Dutch side in terms of talent.
Right.
Um, he's young. He is only 23, but has played right centre back in a back three, right back in a back four, has captained Feyenoord at that young age a lot. Arne Slot is a big fan of him. I think before Slot moved to Liverpool, I think he was linked a lot less with the Premier League, but I think
Mm-hmm.
there's some, well, remains to be seen whether it's lazy journalism. You could see Slot potentially bringing him with him. But I really like him for being a combination of physical, quick, strong, and versatile. Again, similar to Joe Gomez, except he's played DM a lot more than Joe Gomez. I think he understands all three positions of that crucial triangle. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, very aware of when he's a right back passing to a DM, what a DM wants from that, and vice versa, and the same with a centre back. He's sort of progressive with all his passes, top 1% for pass completion from centre back. He reminds me actually of Jurriën Timber, who we haven't got to see loads of
Yeah.
for Arsenal because of that
Good
injury.
player.
But I would say he's the next cab off the Dutch rank in that mold.
Mm-hmm.
Just a real versatile, athletic all-rounder in that sort of defensive triangle, as I said. We've talked about versatility being big for Emery,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see him fitting in flexibly in a number of positions. Yeah, I'd say if there was going to be any weaknesses for him, it would be he's very Conser-like in his tackle percentage.
Right.
He doesn't attempt. He attempts a lot more tackles than Conser. Probably 4 times more per game than Conser. Conser's very, very good at backing off, backing off, backing off. And always see the statistic, he's like the least dribbled past centre back after Virgil van Dijk. But
Yeah.
if you retreat to your own goal line, you never actually have to make a tackle. So it's very hard to dribble past somebody that deep.
Yeah.
Comparatively, Geertruida is more aggressive. Like I say, 4 times more tackles per game attempted than Conser. But what I would say is he has very similar errors leading to shots on target as Conser. So the reason I think that's important is if he's attempting 4 times as many tackles, maybe not being as successful when he makes them as Konsa in percentage terms, he's
Hmm.
still not making errors that lead to shots.
Right.
Um, and I think part of that is tactical. Do you want me to press? Do you want me to go and be aggressive with my tackle, or do you want me to sit off and force creativity in the attacking players? I suppose.
Right.
So yeah, he'd be my standout choice for
Right.
unknown centre back.
Lutsharel Geertruida. Is that how am I saying
That's the
that right?
fella. I
Yeah,
think probably not, but I don't know how to correct you.
yeah. He's yeah, I mean looking at it, right back, centre back, defensive midfielder, that does match the MO of what Aston Villa and Unai Emery seem to be looking for. That kind of versatility can fit into a whole range of roles. And it does feel like right back is an area, or right centre back rather, is somewhere that they're definitely targeting. The 6'1" as well. And I think you're right. I think you do wonder with Mings being injured all of last season, how many goals might he have rescued for us had he been playing and being someone who might just head a corner away that ended up leading to a goal. Um, but I'm just looking at Gertrude here on FP Ref as well, and got his stats sort of almost as going forward, progressive carries, progressive passes, touches, all that. He is very, very good. Very, very high numbers on that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And I think especially because he's not on the eye, he's not Frimpong. He's not somebody that flies forward at every opportunity. He's not an all-out attacking right back. I think he's pretty defensive minded,
mm,
comparatively. I thought watching the Netherlands was interesting, especially the 90 minutes with him in it. They play some pretty odd defensive patterns. There was times where
yeah,
he stepped right into defensive midfield and was really aggressive with it, and that seemed to catch them out for the first goal.
yeah, it did.
Um, but then he won the ball high to create the second goal in a similar their first goal. Sorry, so the second goal of the game, Netherlands' first goal. So it was certainly odd tactically.
Mm.
Um, Not a great sign to concede 3 goals against Switzerland, but I think we probably underestimated Switzerland a little bit, and I don't look forward to them in the draw if England get to them.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think he's first and foremost, despite some excellent attacking stats, as you say, a defensive-minded player. Despite his stature, I would say he isn't he isn't Van Dijk. He's not going to win 80% of his aerial duels. He's
right.
on a par with Konsa for that in the sort of 62% territory.
Sure.
But when you compare that, which I think is a real shock, Diego Carlos was as low as like 40%.
Yeah,
For
that blew
somebody
my
who's a
mind, that.
real physical unit, like he's massive, right? Like, how is he not winning more of his aerial duels? He's sort of bottom 5%, I think, in all of the top five leagues as a centre back for win
Wow.
aerial duels. And I don't think he gives us enough with the ball in the way that, say, Pau Torres does
Yeah.
to justify that.
He's a bit of a cult hero, isn't he, at Villa, Diego Carlos? I think I was really taken aback when I saw that stat about how little he wins headers. I don't know why. I just hadn't really noticed it just from the eye test. And then I think the thing that's kind of put me off him a little bit is not, he's a bit older, probably decent wages, but also like, yeah, his distribution to me, I know he can hit a good long ball every now and again. He's kind of the only defender who seems to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
occasionally does lead to good things, but I can think of about 2 or 3 goals this season that we've conceded, which was him passing straight into the opposition midfield. Bournemouth away was one. He did it at Manchester United away, I think, when they came back and won 3-2. He just doesn't quite. There's something about him that I don't quite trust as much as I do in some of the other defenders. Now, there's some Villa fans who probably watch that or hear that who don't particularly like to hear us be negative about our own players. That's fine. I get that.
Yep.
But I don't know. I just think I do think it's an area that Villa needs to improve, and particularly the aerial duels. That we continuously are conceding goals from corners, free kicks, just crosses into the box. Look at the Brentford game where we lost, or we were 2-0 up. It went to 3-2. and then it ended 3-3. But they just sent Regulon down the left, bombing down the left, send ball in, crosses in constantly. And it was like what I've said has happened a lot with Villa this season is that we go from composed and in control to looking casual. And it's like we don't react within game. And then if an opposition team suddenly just thinks we're 2 down, let's just go for it and just hit them hard. And Villa don't seem to have reacted that well from about January onwards when teams started to do that. And it was almost like everyone was a bit too polite at the back, and you needed maybe a Mings to just sort of do a very basic thing of scream at everyone, so everyone to sort of wake up. But also just to have somebody of the profile that might just win a header. That against Brentford, for instance, we conceded 2-3 goals from crosses into the box. Whereas if we had somebody who's a bit better at winning those headers as well as being good on the ball, we might have conceded just one or none at all. So yes, I definitely think it's an area worth looking at. And yeah, I do. I like the shout. I think I'm going to go check him out, and I'll probably be on YouTube all night just watching him and then messaging you and said atting Monchi on Twitter, say that have you seen this guy? So yeah, 23.
We know from last year it's the City scouts that watch this, because they'll be on to him straight away. They took Doco off our hands last year, and now it'll be Geertruida you watch. But yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying about Tyrone Mings and whether we missed him, because we certainly did miss somebody like him, his physicality at times.
Yeah,
if he was right-footed, be a lot less concerned, I think, about going into next year, what we may or may not need. I think the interesting thing for next year is we know full well we're not going to play with the same back four playing the same way week in, week out. There's going to be games where you favour a different profile of centre-back to other games. I think Carlos was fantastic. He was man of the match in the 2 Arsenal games, right? When the opposition is sort of playing to his strength, so to speak, there is absolutely a job there for him to do. It's just whether those games come up frequently enough. I know Maatsen sort of changes things a little bit left centre-back. We were linked with Mario Hermoso earlier in the window, who I would say is a sort of left-sided version of what I'm describing, in that he's sort of left back, left centre-back. Whether that, it's hard to imagine how these players fit in when it feels like Pau Torres is irreplaceable, right? He plays every game we can get him to play, because we've got nobody else with his skill set. It feels likely Maatsen's going to play a lot more games than he doesn't. So really, are we talking about moving into a back 5 at times where Maatsen is left wing back? Ealing Jr. can do that. Is there room therefore for a Pau Torres, Mings, and a E.g. Geertruida? Really interesting to watch. I think the main thing is a player like Geertruida, whether you do or don't move on a Diego Carlos, gives you so many more options to do that, and you're not immediately scuppered into a 3 of your options if you have an injury, which is where we found ourselves a lot last year. It was like one player is injured. Okay, we know we can only play this way because of what's left.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a lot of names on the defensive side of the pitch, I would say, going into the new season, but they're all pretty flexible, and I think that's a positive thing. I know you don't want to be slagging off players, as you said, and people jump on it. If it was me and I was running the whole thing, I think I'd be trying to move on Diego Carlos because of the money involved and the wages involved, and I think there are fewer systems that necessitate him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.